So we have mushrooms starting to grow in this soil, guys. We can see there's quite a few, and it's not a concern because this shows that the soil is functioning as it should be doing. This is a sign that the soil is alive and kicking. We've got lots of mushrooms forming here. There's one there. You can see all these like little white spot lump type things. They're all fungus. And look at the mass of fungus we've got here. Now, does that mean that the humid zone, which I've originally sort of thought was in the middle of the terrarium, does that mean the humid area is slightly shifted towards the cooler side? Because all this fungus, which is called the yellow plant mushroom. Now, they are slightly toxic, but there was one which formed into kind of a large bulge. You can see this here. Just a few days ago, that was a really large yellow bulge, but something has obviously eaten it because it's kind of, well, disappeared a little bit. I mean, this soil is teeming with isopods and springtails, and there may be the odd centipede. There's also earthworms, guys, so let me just show you. There we go, there is an earthworm. Yeah, so there's a lot of activity going on in that soil to kind of improve the quality of it as ecologically as possible in terrarium circumstances, because obviously we can't mimic nature exact, but we can try to improve our ways to replicate nature. And the soil really is the foundation to the life within the terrarium, because it feeds the plants, which also fix energy into the soil and draw energy out of the soil, and the insects get their energy from the plants and the soil and the nutrients and water and carbon and sulfates, i.e. salts, and all that gets kind of used by the plants, and then the gecko benefits from feeding on the insects, and so it's all, it's all this kind of cycle. It's like an ecosystem, which I keep mentioning, keep referring back to the word ecosystem, and this is exactly what it is. It's a living ecosystem. It's kind of a miniature slice of, a replicated version of their wild habitat. So I've added a couple of new alpines, which I bought from a alpine specialist locally to here in North Wales. And bearing in mind that they may not survive because these plants, which can grow in Nepal and other parts of Asia where leopard geckos live in the wild, they're used to kind of a range of different climates. Some are up in high ranges of mountains, and others are in more humid areas. So so in a terrarium, obviously, it's really the best sort of plants for terrariums are succulents, like this aloe here, just because of there's a limit really to the sort of climates that you can create in terrariums, and that's probably one of the reasons that may explain why many of the plants that I have tried to grow in here haven't survived. And this Dianthus maiden pink, which grows in Nepal, is sort of struggling here a little bit. The sedum there is doing pretty well so far, touch wood. And this little furry green plant here is an asparagus fern, which also grow in Nepal and Pakistan, and so that seems to be doing pretty well. So it's all trial and error, but yeah, it's good to see the soil is really alive. I've taken a few pH samples today, and it's showing mostly kind of like on the slightly acidic side, but also slightly alkaline in this sort of area here on the cool side. So because plants, they're quite fussy living things, biological elements. So they have certain needs. Each individual plant has their own needs. So they have their own soil type preference, moisture preference, full sun, part sun, shade, cooler temperatures, poor soils, rocky, dense, rich, fertile soils. There's a whole range, climatic factors. Some plants love the insulation of a covering of snow in the winter, for example in the Himalayas in Nepal. Obviously we're not going to be able to replicate that here, but that's just an example of how plants can adapt to their environment and can be, they each have their own individual needs, like humans do, and like animals do, and like reptiles do, because we are nature, all of us, and nature is a system, and what we call an ecological system. Ecology doesn't get recognized enough in the big wide world. It's a term, what is ecology? And it's basically how living things interact with their non-living physical environment. For example, with the rocks, there's branches which are non-living. The soil, it's made. What is soil? It's a concoction of broken down rocks, stones, debris, leaf litter, sticks, dead insects, fungi, moss. It's a combination of all those things which are broken down and get recycled through the soil to create new life, for example, like in plants. And eggs, so worms pupating into beetles, for example, stems from the soil. Okay, do you get the gist of where I'm going here? And all this is to do with ecology. So it's the interaction of living things with the non-physical environment. It's like interrelationships. So it's interdisciplinary. So ecology. Habitats. You see, a living thing lives in an area known as a habitat. And if we consider habitat and use that term with in terms of the different zones in this terrarium, so like there's 3 main zones, like the arid zone, the humid zone, and the woodland zone. But then now I could argue whether the woodland zone is actually more humid than the humid zone. In certain parts it will be. So it's all kind of, and like spot temperatures, you see, they vary dramatically from one area to the next and everything, because there's a whole lot of things going on in there ecologically.